It's early in the morning.
Ah, sweet sounds of jazz music. Really makes you think, doesn't it? Anyways, welcome to the Art and Philosophy Hour. Our topic is art today. To what extent does an artist's outside life affect the way we see their work? If humans are expected to not judge a book by its cover, how do we judge art without an artist's past and process affecting the way we judge it? Or do we judge that? If a mass murderer produces beautiful, complex works of art, how are viewers supposed to respond knowing what the artist has done? Is an artistic lens entirely different than a human lens? Can art be judged differently than people judge anything else? If so, why is it that art is regarded as a portrayal of such human thoughts and images? If art really comes from someone's soul and is a projection of emotion, then how can we view art so drastically different than the way we are supposed to judge humans, not by their cover? Not only does this issue deal with art, but it deals with ethics. If we know that an artist has done something, should it affect the way we see the work? And does it? It obviously does, because everything affects everything else in some way. Our knowledge is entirely affected by other knowledge, and our perception of things is entirely dictated by what we already know. So, if you look at a piece of art, such as the artist, Caravaggio, who I just showed you, has allegedly killed a number of people and had a vicious temper and often got in street fights. So even though the times were different back then, murder wasn't premeditated, it was more like fighting with somebody to the death. It still doesn't change that it is murder. So should that affect the way I see his work? Another example is there's a man in Tennessee who has bought a painting by the man who killed Martin Luther King Jr. that he did in jail. So is that ethically right, or are we just supposed to look at art objectively from an artist's past? There's two options here. The option that you look at an artist's work and you take their background and you interpret it through that, or you look at an artist's work entirely through your own perception and you gather your own interpretation from it. It's not that much different from analyzing literature or poems, because you can read it and you can know about the artist and then gather and interpret and analyze from there, or you can read, a poem and you can get your own interpretation from it. When you analyze poetry, you refer to the poet as the speaker, and you don't make any biases or assumptions based on what you know about the poet. But sometimes we can't help doing that. So how does that apply to art? I conducted an experiment where I took 3 groups, a control group and 2 other groups, and I showed them all the same piece of art separately. The first group, I didn't tell them anything about the artist, and I recorded what they said about it, their analysis of the art. The second group, I told them something extremely positive about the artist to see if that influenced the way they see them. The third group, I told them something extremely negative about the artist to see how that influenced the way they see them. All 3 of the groups were IB art classes, so they've been sort of trained in the way of analysis in regards to art. The piece is called Marilyn Monroe by William de Kooning.
When I look at it, I think of like imperfection is beauty, because Marilyn Monroe is seen as like a really beautiful person, but then in the picture, it's like messy and stuff. So, yeah.
I believe Marilyn Monroe had an affair with one of our presidents, and in this picture, she looks like she's naked to me. I don't know if that's the same to everyone else, but she doesn't look like she's portrayed as someone beautiful and someone to be looked up to, which is the way that she is generally expressed in society today. She's sort of an icon of beauty and class, but perhaps that's not the way she's portrayed here.
She's also, like, a lot of people in society, I feel, see her as more of, like, a sex icon, and she, like, also, like, a lot of society saw her as that, but I feel like herself, she was kind of scared to show herself like that. She was more like insecure, and this kind of demonstrates those insecurities of herself and trying to hide that from society, although society didn't seem to see that.
It's almost kind of disrespectful just because how
One at a time, go ahead, Sequoia.
how the mouth and the eyes are really choppy and it looks like really poorly done. and like she's trying to disrespect her. In a way. That's what I see.
Actually, it's like trashy almost because she's like
Yeah.
she's got tons of eye makeup, like I don't know, big red lipstick.
Pile of trash. You see like a bunch of different colors just like jumbled together, and I kind of see that.
Marilyn Monroe's seen as an icon, and I think it's her seen as a negative icon. I don't think it's necessarily her as a person. I think it's how society sees her. It's how this artist sees her.
I think it maybe represents more than just Marilyn Monroe, but I'm not really sure what. It may be just like how we see like people that we idolize and stuff, and how maybe they're not as good as we look at them as. Like, you know, we put them on a pedestal when they're really not as good as they seem.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that a little. Just kind of how we kind of see famous people, like, as a girl, like, whenever we see a pretty girl, we're, like, jealous, or we're like, oh, she's so pretty, her body is, like, perfect, this and that. We kind of see them as an image we want to be, like, or, and this kind of shows that there's more to them than just that. So the messiness can also represent the different scars they can be, kind of showing from society. Like the black is just kind of different effects than just a beauty of an image of a person.
I think it could be portraying like the negative connotations or negative parts of like the quintessential beauty or like sex icon.
Represent imperfections because it's not a perfect painting. Like Marilyn Monroe wasn't a perfect person.
Also, she seems like she's really fake, and like she's sitting on a chair or something on a little pedestal, and kind of like Barbie, and she's fake. And
The group was told that William de Kooning had a very strong relationship with his mother, was a women's rights activist, and throughout his body of work portrayed women very beautifully, very positively, with no negative connotations towards women and their bodies in society.
I initially thought of this as something provocative, but after hearing the interpretation, it makes me question it, because I have a hard time believing that somebody for women's rights would present a provocative woman piece. I mean, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a woman, I see her breasts, and it feels as though her legs are spread apart in a sexual manner. So I'm kind of getting conflicting reads. Yeah.
As I read it as really violent, so hearing what you said about his background really makes me question what's going on.
Yeah.
I do see the two breasts, and I also like the belly. She looks kind of pregnant, because like the red leg pokes out more.
The third group, who was told the most negative amount of things about the artist, was actually told the truth, which is that William de Kooning was a very misogynistic artist who often portrayed women very messily, violently, sloppily, with not much respect towards their bodies. William de Kooning could draw photographically, but as you can see, he chose to paint very differently. So here's how they reacted.
To me, it looks like a little kid.
Okay.
I thought the same thing actually, and then when I heard what you had to say about him, I thought that was interesting, because it's kind of like his view of women and his depiction of women has been altered because he didn't have a good experience, so he's still stuck in like this skewed childhood version.
The colors are very bright and happy to me. Like they're yellows and oranges and pinks, which are very warm. So, like in my opinion, I think those are warm, bright, happy colors. So I don't really think that he's upset about anything.
It must have really hit him that hard to just draw Marilyn Monroe like that. It's like a sex symbol. And it's like, golly, that's bad.
Well, like I think that if you can draw really nice, really realistic, and he's drawing Marilyn Monroe as this like sloppy but like brightly colored thing, it's just kind of like, ah.
I think she's jumping.
No.
Flash colors and reds are kind of like
Reds sometimes look a little
passionate stuff. So
I don't think about flesh at all, actually.
You don't get a bad feeling out of it, really.
The fact that she's beautiful and she's a sex symbol and people look at her like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful.
I just feel like if he
and
wanted
he
to get back
made
at
her
women,
so
it would be
repulsive
different colors or something.
and had her freaking legs wide open. Like, what? How's that look?
Like maybe he's trying to question if she's still like seen as a sex symbol, as such a appealing sex symbol. But looking at it, saying this is Marilyn Monroe, this one right here, the sloppy one. You know what I mean?
So as you can see, the piece spoke predominantly for itself. Many people looked at the title and took connotations from that. Marilyn Monroe was the title, and a lot of people ended up talking about connotations about Marilyn Monroe, about being a sex symbol, about society's view of a sex symbol, and also about women. The control group spoke a lot about that. The second group was told something positive. Both Haley and Audrey questioned what I said about the artist and reacted to the image rather than what I said. So they weren't necessarily reacting to the artist's past, they were reacting to the piece. The third group, who was told the truth about the artist, reacted strongly to that and sort of based what they saw in the piece off of what I said, but also their reactions were similar to the first group who didn't hear what I said. So again, the piece spoke predominantly for itself. So what does that say about how we should see the work? When it comes down to it, everyone's perspective is different, and the way everyone sees a work is going to be different, and interpretation vastly differs. But I think that it can be said that an artist's background influences it whether we know it or not. Obviously, de Kooning was a misogynist, and people pointed that out without knowing anything about him. All three groups mentioned something about it. So it may not affect the way we see it with the knowledge of the artist, but in the long run, an artist's intention and background will influence the work. It's just not our knowledge of the artist's background that directly affects it. It's just the general life of the artist that affects it. Over now.